Hey everyone, Reese here, and welcome to yet another Reese Ramble, episode 16. And in this one, I just want to talk about, and it may end up being a slightly shorter episode as a result, but I just want to talk about something that's actually going on in our world of retro gaming and retro computing for once, because I know I like to ramble about myself a lot, but yeah, there's not really much going on in my life at the minute outside of that. So I thought I'd talk about this. Plus, literally everyone on the internet is weighing in with their opinions on this as well. So I thought my perspective might be quite interesting as an Atari guy, because I'm kind of an outsider to all this, but kind of close enough to it to kind of understand what's going on. So here we go. Here's my take. So I'm going to start from very, very basic first principles, because there are a lot of people who listen to this podcast who are kind of family and friends and people who didn't find it via my YouTube channel. So I'm going to explain some things that I'm sure a lot of you are probably already familiar with, but just for their benefit and just to also kind of see where I'm coming from with all this. So anyway, of course, I'm talking about the Amiga Global Alliance, and I'll explain what that is very shortly. But when I was a kid, I had a computer, or we had a computer in the family, called the Atari ST. Now, of course, that was made by Atari, huge name in the gaming and computing world that I'm sure you've heard of, still around in one form or another. And that was released in 1985. Now, Atari had a rival company called Commodore, who released their own machine called the Amiga. And the two computers they're quite closely related in ways that I don't really want to go into great detail, but they have a lot of kind of shared history and stuff and shared DNA. But that's something for kind of a more in-depth documentary. But ultimately, they were rivals. The Amiga was the more expensive machine, came out slightly later, so it was a bit more capable in certain areas. And there's kind of been this friendly rivalry between the two camps ever since. And I am in the Atari ST camp, and well, the Atari in general camp, as I'm sure you'll know full well if you've seen any of my videos and my kind of collection that I have here of pretty much all eras of Atari. But yeah, so basically, both computers, both machines have a really big communities around them, and I think it's fair to say that the Amiga was longer lived, with it sort of coming later, and with it kind of having slightly those kind of better capabilities meant that it did kind of stretch a bit later into the 90s and kind of into the early internet age, and there were a lot of people kind of going online with their Amigas. By the time a lot of us ST owners had kind of moved on to the PC. And a lot of communities kind of grew out of that, those kind of early BBSs and that kind of stuff, and a lot of user groups. And essentially, there's a really strong community around that particular machine and around the Commodore machines on the internet. So a chap called David Pleasance, and this is the news story from this week, which I'm going to be talking about. A chap called David Pleasance, who was the managing director of Commodore UK for a time during the Amiga era, and he's kind of been on the periphery of the community for years now. He's kind of always sort of kept his toe in. I think it's safe to say, or fair to say. And he's released a few books over the years about his time at Commodore, and he's kind of worked with other people who were at Commodore at the time to kind of put those books together. And of course, if you're interested in history, I haven't read them, but obviously I've read all of the kind of Atari equivalents. Like I say, we're kind of living in this parallel universe. But by all accounts, they're interesting and kind of factual and in-depth books on the history of that kind of period of Commodore. Very interesting stuff. Probably the kind of thing that I should read at some point. Once I run out of other stuff to do, just because I am really interested in the history of the computer industry and all that kind of thing. There have been some accusations that have kind of come out of the woodwork that perhaps he wasn't as heavily involved in the writing of those books as he claims, but I don't think that's something that I'm qualified to talk about, really. And I think that is a bit of a distraction. But anyway, David Pleasance, the managing director of Commodore UK for a period in the 90s, whose job it was to flog Amigas, he started this Kickstarter. Now, I'm going to explain the concept of Kickstarter as well, because, like I say, not everyone is fully versed in all of this kind of internet lore. But what Pleasance has done is he set up a crowdfunding attempt on a website called Kickstarter. Now, to give a recent example of a successful project that everyone was talking about at the time, of course, there was the Barcadia in Norwich, which was an arcade bar, which I did mention in a previous ramble. And the proprietors of that bar, one of whom happens to be a fellow retro YouTuber, set up this Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign, saying, I need 25 grand to cover costs of this, and this. I've already acquired the pub. We're already in the process of refurbishing it, but it means we can launch sooner. And in return, I will give you certain things like, a certain number of tokens for the arcade machines, or, at a certain level, we'll put your name on the wall as a backer, so you can come and visit and you can see your name on the wall alongside all the other backers. And it was quite a kind of coherent and sensible project. I know not everyone got behind that one for various reasons that are way out of the scope of this particular ramble. But that's kind of an example of the kind of thing that people use Kickstarter for. And like I say, that one was successfully funded. They got the 25 grand and Barcadia is now open and trading. And what David Pleasance has used Kickstarter for is to set up something called the Amiga Global Alliance. Now, the name of the Amiga Global Alliance, AGA, is a pun. It was the name of the chipset that was used in those particular computers. It was very clever, and this has raised quite a few eyebrows in the community, and not only in the Amiga community, but in the kind of the wider retro gaming and retro computing community, which is why I kind of wanted to talk about it. So the concept of this Amiga Global Alliance is that basically it's kind of a central hub where all of the community efforts around the Amiga can kind of coordinate. So the intro to the Kickstarter says, a big hello to all Commodore and Amiga fans wherever you live in the world. The time has come to stand up and be counted. Subscribe to AGA, Amiga Global Alliance, and between us, let's build the best retro computing community on the planet. And essentially, this all hinges around this hub website, which is asking for £15,000 to put together. And basically the individual components of the site are, there's going to be a forum where people can go on and they can just chat about general Amiga stuff. There's a marketplace where people can buy and sell stuff. There's a technical support section where people can go, obviously, if they've got these old machines and they're kind of they've got technical issues with them, as these older computers all tend to have. They can go there and get help and find an expert who can help them to fix it. There's a global diary of events. Of course, a lot of these communities put on real life shows and events and things. And, he's proposing that they have a central diary where they can list all of those for all of the individual user groups and things. Jobs listings for freelance services and that kind of thing. Like I said, it's kind of related to the repair stuff before, but anything kind of loosely connected to that world. An archive/library of documentation and that kind of stuff, historical information. Goodies, I'm not quite sure what goodies is. Section filled with treasures donated by fellow AGA subscribers. Is that like a museum type thing? I'm not really sure. And basically a database/directory of contacts in the world of the Amiga. And it all sounds very good to kind of bring all of this stuff together into one site. But the main kind of issues with this are that he's kind of proposing that he single-handedly runs this site. That it's his project, and that he's the ex-Commodore guy, the ex-Amiga guy, and it's up to him to kind of fix all of the problems and finally bring everyone together. In this kind of fragmented world that is the online Commodore Amiga fandom, and I think that's the part that's really been a bit of a kick in the teeth for a lot of people who've sort of invested a huge amount of time and money and effort into that community for the past 20 plus years. Like I say, a lot of these sort of big forums and things kind of grew out of those early days of those kind of user groups and BBSs and that kind of thing that people were doing in the late 90s. And for someone to suddenly turn around and say, oh no, the efforts that everyone's put in over the past 20 odd years haven't been good enough. We need to scrap it all. We need to start again with this one kind of unified platform, has been taken as quite an insult by those people who've been involved with that. He later on, he actually posted a bit of a rant on Facebook, just saying, there's all these anonymous trolls trying to take me down and all that kind of stuff. If you've got real concerns, let me know here, kind of thing. And there were some really big names in the community who responded to that with some really really sort of articulate and thought out and well sort of reasoned answers as to why they thought it was a bad idea. At the time of recording, he hasn't responded to any of that publicly, so I'm not quite sure, what's going to come of that. But yeah, I mean, looking kind of into it from the outside, I totally get it. It's like, if you'd been running a forum or designing hardware for the Amiga or writing games or software or whatever for the past 20 plus years, and all of a sudden an ex-Commodore guy comes along and says, "Oh no, you're doing it wrong. You need to be doing it this way. Give me 15 grand and I'll set up a website so you can do it properly." I mean, you're going to tend to piss off, aren't you? Which a lot of people have done. But yeah, by and large, it's actually been very sort of constructive and very, very well articulated on their part, which is always good to see in this kind of online world. Oh, and I should just mention that on top of the 15 grand that he's trying to raise to build this thing, he's also asking, well, I don't think this is actually, this has kind of been implied, but not really kind of said outright. But as part of backing it, you basically get a year's free access to it. Now, a year's free access kind of implies that obviously after that year, it's not going to be free. So not only are people paying a huge amount of money for someone to build a website that already does something that's already out there and being done by other people, but then he's going to start charging on an ongoing basis for access to it, which just it doesn't make any sense. And part of the kind of the criticism that I've seen from people, particularly on that Facebook post, is just people asking him for clarification and saying, what exactly are you offering that's going to be worth this kind of ongoing financial commitment? What does it do over and above what's already out there? And ultimately, his argument seems to be, well, it's all in one place and it's controlled by me. But anyway. And as I mentioned earlier on when I was talking about the Barcadia Kickstarter, the rewards for these Kickstarter crowdfunding campaigns are usually quite closely tied in with the actual campaign itself. Like I say, in that case, it was a bar with arcade machines, and you got tokens that you could use to play on the arcade machines, and you got your name on the wall in the bar and that kind of stuff, and that made sense as far as rewards were concerned. But another thing that's kind of raised a lot of eyebrows with this David Pleasance thing with the Amiga Global Alliance is the rewards that he's offering. Now, he's written a few books over the years about his time at Commodore. I have heard some criticism from some people that his contribution was more kind of putting the idea out there and then kind of getting other people to kind of contribute stuff to it and kind of putting his name on it and his face on it. I don't really know. I'm not. I wasn't involved in those campaigns. They were actually Kickstarter's campaigns as well, and I'll mention. I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. But essentially, he's written books about the history of Commodore, and if you back this, and I think I've actually got the page open in front of me here. The minimum pledge to get a reward is £38, and if you pledge £38 towards this project, you essentially get copies of his books, ebook copies of his books. So not physical copies. You have to pledge more. I think it's £75. But essentially you get ebook copies of his books. Now, if you're in that community and you're interested in that kind of stuff, you've probably already got those books, but yeah, all right, fair enough. It's his project and they are kind of related to that. You get a documentary called Amiga Alive and Kicking. You get a copy of a Commodore 64 game. Okay. You get a Commodore Alive and Kicking. I think that's another documentary. This is all stuff that's already out there and already been out there for a while. You get a download of an album, which is apparently music created with Amigas and sort of loosely related, inspired by kind of thing. All right, yeah, okay. Arguably that's still on topic. And you get a copy of his son's reggae album. So apparently Mr. Pleasance has two sons, and these sons are in a reggae band. And one of the things that you get for backing this project is a copy of their album. Yeah. So Yeah, like I said, you have to back a bit more to get the actual physical hardback copies of the book. But a lot of people are saying that this is all his like personal stuff, his personal projects. All right, fair enough. If you're interested in the books and you want, like I say, you can pledge more and you can get hardback copies of all of this stuff. If it's something that you're interested in and you don't already own, then maybe it's a good way to kind of buy all of those as a bundle, even if you're not particularly interested in this global alliance thing. But the rewards aren't really sort of directly related to the thing that he's trying to build. It's not like he's saying, oh, you get, I don't know, 10 years free membership or sort of, a more prominent listing in the directory, or, you get the special, I don't know, special thing by your name on the forums or whatever. Which is odd, because that's kind of more kind of the done thing. So he's had some criticism for that. And some of the kind of more extreme criticism I've seen is that maybe you're sitting on a garage full of books and this is just an opportunity to try and get rid of them, and also a way for him to kind of justify taking the bulk of the money from the Kickstarter. Usually with these projects, the money is supposed to be sort of fully invested in kind of the end goal, the end result, and that's kind of how the platform's supposed to work. But in his case, it seems like he's actually sort of pocketing most of the money for it. And they do actually allude to that as well and say that, we'll reinvest 65% back into community projects or something. So it's like, okay, so, 35% is just going straight into your pocket, is it? I don't know. It's not something that he's explicitly said, obviously. But it certainly raised some eyebrows, and it's certainly not something that has been addressed directly. So yeah, just some kind of other observations about this thing for anyone who's not sort of familiar with the whole thing. One thing that has been quite a I keep using that phrase, raising a few eyebrows. I need to come up with some alternatives to that. But one thing that's also kind of really kind of raised many questions about this particular project is that. Initially, when the sort of Kickstarter project first launched, you could go to the page and you could scroll down, and there were loads of pictures of kind of really prominent members of the Amiga community, and just like a little kind of paragraph on each person of kind of how they were directly involved with this and how they were kind of personally endorsing it and all of that. And some of those names and faces have since disappeared. Now, I actually know one of those people. I don't want to drag him into it, and he doesn't want any drama either, but essentially, a while back, he talked to David about this, about potentially being involved with building a website for him, and it was all kind of very, very vague and high level. And then months later, this website, this Kickstarter launched, and his face was very prominently featured on it, saying that he was like a technical lead on the project, in charge of kind of deploying the website and stuff. And he was like, "Well, hang on a second, I don't remember agreeing to any of this." And it's since come out of the woodwork that, there's actually like 4 other people whose names and faces are sort of being predominantly pushed as a big part of this campaign, as being kind of sort of partners in this campaign, who are in the exact same position. They've kind of vaguely had conversations with this guy about it in the past, or about something in the past, and he's kind of taken that to mean that they've officially endorsed it and want their name and their face associated with it. And there's been a big sort of outcry about that as well. And of course, on the kind of the darker corners of the internet, there have been people who've gone on some proper rants about it being a scam and trying to extract money from people. But I think everyone can kind of see this for what it is. And being charitable, I think David's, he's from that kind of very early internet generation. He's not really that closely in touch with the community as it stands at the moment, and that's why he's decided to build this, because he's actually not really sure what's out there or how it all works. And yeah, in the late 90s, if someone had come out and said, "Hey, we should build this hub website, this big community that we can all kind of rally around, and we'll all pay a subscription to kind of," that wasn't really, obviously paying for stuff wasn't really a big thing in the late 90s. But we can pay, and we can all pay to be a part of it, and that will kind of pay for the upkeep of the site, and it'll be like a central repository for all of the documentation, and a place where everyone can stay in touch and have each other's contact details. And yeah, it sounds like a great concept. Apart from the fact that it's like it's 25 years later now, and all of that stuff already exists, and the people that have been running that stuff off their own backs are kind of miffed that someone's kind of waded in and said, "No, you're doing it wrong. I need to redo it all from scratch." It's still got 23 days to go at the time of recording. It's got 47 backers, and they've raised £2,456 of their £15,000 goal. People can withdraw their pledges. I don't know if anyone's planning on doing that. And on the more positive side of things, because I want to be impartial. I do want to sort of cover the what little kind of positive response this has had. I did notice on his Facebook post, his Facebook post was very kind of confrontational. It starts with "important notice, please read" in capital letters in true boomer style. I can imagine him going to his PC in the corner of the living room and dialing up to AOL to type out this important message. Taking the dust cover off it and the doilies and stuff. But anyway, that's just my weird brain. But this post that he's written is very confrontational. A number of people, and growing, who are enjoying slagging off my AGA concept. It's a massive misconception, and he's asking questions. If there are already sites in existence that offer everything this does, please send the links. And that's obviously written in such a way that he doesn't think there is. A couple of people have responded with very similar directories and forums and stuff that offer a lot of this stuff already, of course. And he's the only one who's willing to invest money into hardware and software developers working in the kind of Amiga world, and no one else is offering to do that, even though there are plenty of kind of hardware and software developers already out there working on this stuff and using sites similar to sort of Kickstarter and the rest of it to raise money to do that. And it works because of the kind of the decentralized nature of the internet and the fact that this stuff doesn't all need to be under one roof, because we have specialist sites that kind of do these individual parts very well. But yeah, it just kind of goes on a bit of a rant. But there is some positive stuff. Like I said, there's a few people saying, thanks for this. People just don't understand it, and that kind of thing. And a couple of people saying that they backed it and they believe in it and that they want it to succeed. But yeah, overwhelmingly, as I've said before, most of these responses are from people who have been in the Amiga community for a long time. Some really big names that even I'm familiar with. Just kind of explaining why it's not really needed and why they won't be getting involved with it. So yeah, quite an interesting. It certainly put the cat amongst the pigeons in the retro community this week, and certainly rattled a lot of cages as well. Just to keep throwing out those metaphors. Like I say, it's not something that I'm really close to, not being a part of that community, but it's just really interesting to see. And there has been some discussion kind of in the Atari community as well. In fact, there have been people involved with this going onto the Atari forums and saying, "Hey, everyone, come and back this project." And of course, they've been shut down. They're like, "Well, this isn't for us. Why are you spamming this here like you are everywhere else?" Of course, nobody here is going to sign up for that because we're not Amiga people. But there has also been some discussion about some Mickey taking, shall we say, about people setting up a similar thing in the Atari world as well, which of course has been kind of laughed off because we're quite happy with our kind of few forums and our kind of small community that we have already, and very much seems that way on the Amiga side of the fence as well. So an interesting project. It'll be interesting to see how it all kind of plays out. Really, it's still early days yet. Like I mentioned before, it's still got 23 days to go at the time of recording. So yeah, will it be successfully funded? Will this site launch? Will it end up driving a wedge between the people that have backed it and the rest of the Amiga community, who seem to be the people who've kind of been running the community for the past 20 plus years? Really interesting stuff. I'm sure it's something I will revisit in a future ramble. But anyway, I don't really have anything else to talk about this week. In fact, I'm surprised I managed to say so much about that. Apparently I've been keeping up with it in a lot greater detail than I give myself credit for. But I will put a link to that in the usual places. Not because I want to endorse it or want to encourage people to sign up for it, but just in case you want to kind of go and read it firsthand and see what it's all about. And I'll put a link to that Facebook post and stuff on there as well as David Pleasance's website. But yeah, interesting project. It's certainly caused a bit of a stir, and interesting to see where it goes. Maybe, let's do the YouTuber thing and say, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I will read them and I will respond to them. But to be honest, I think I pretty much know everyone's thoughts on this anyway from talking to people. Thank you very much for listening to this week's Reese Rambles. This has been episode 16. Did I say it was 16 at the beginning? Certainly has. I hope that's you up to speed on something that's going on in our little online world. And I will be back with my usual service, hopefully, next week. So, yep, subscribe to Control Alt Reese and all that. And have a lovely whatever. Bye.